there, it's Rachel from Rachael Scraps Crochet, and I'm going to do a quick, well, probably not quick, tutorial video for you showing how to sew up your realistic softball or baseball. Now the pattern for this softball or baseball is the same. I just use different yarn to get a different size ball, and the pattern is available on my Etsy store, so I'm going to put the link in the video description box below. I made this pattern to look like a real softball or baseball to make it as realistic as possible. We are going to sew it the same way they make a real one. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to show you how to do the sewing part. Now the pieces that the pattern shows you to make, it may have you make 2, and it will show where to place the stitch markers also in the pattern. So make sure those are in there before you begin. And you need about 10 feet of red yarn, 2 yarn needles, because we are going to be working on both sides of the yarn while we sew it up. And like I said before, we're going to sew it up the way they sew up a real baseball. So to find the end, or we're going to find the middle of the yarn, the red yarn. So the way to do that, that's pretty easy, is line up the 2 ends of the yarn together and then just kind of pull back. And you'll get to the middle. That's the very, that's the middle of that long piece. So I'm going to just tie a knot right there at the end, and then it will hold the end in place. So that way it won't move around and you'll have even length of yarn on both sides. So I'm going to go back to the other ends, but I'm going to separate it this time. So I can put a yarn needle on each side. And I'm going to pull the tail of the yarn on each length, so it's about the same on both sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is line up the 2 pieces so that they're sitting in opposite positions, like kind of like a T turned on its side, with the stitch markers on the 2 opposite ends lined up with each other. And then I'm going to take my yarn with the 2 yarn needles attached. Make sure that you do have that center point marked with a knot. I'm going to kind of lay it so it kind of sits near the middle. And then I'm going to take the 2 opposite ends. And now the whole time I'm going to be working on this, I don't want these to kind of, the extra yarn to kind of lay over each other too much, because I want to prevent tangles, which would be like a, lengthy process to untangle them every time. So I'm going to kind of keep the 2 balls of extra yarn on the sides. So we're going to work off the stitch markers, and now these are all completely even. The pattern shows where to put them. And these 2 bottom ones are lined up with each other, and these 2 top ones are lined up with each other. So you can choose either one. I'm going to start with the bottom one just so I can get them out of here, because I want to remove them as soon as I can. So I put my yarn needle into the one on the bottom first, because I'm going to be sewing up away from myself. And you could in theory start here and sew towards yourself, but on all the balls of these that I've made, I've sewn going upward. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm always going to be working from, this is the back of the work, which has this is the yarn tail from the beginning of the magic ring. So that should be on the bottom, and you should be able to tell from your stitches, if you don't know what the top and what the bottom is, if you see either an X or a V shape for your stitches, that's the top. And the X or the V comes from if you're doing yarn over or yarn under when you crochet. If you are seeing stitches that have this little horizontal line going, you can kind of see a little stitch here, but then you see a horizontal line going on top, that is the back side of the work. This is technically what's called the wrong side, and that's the part you want on the inside of the ball. So we're going to turn it over and have that side facing down. Keep the X or the V shaped stitches on the top for both pieces. So our sewing needle is going to go from the back to the front like that. And we're going to keep doing that for all of these stitches that we sew the whole time. So we are going to put the first needle into the bottom stitch, and I'm just going to take out that stitch marker. We don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So it's going to go into the bottom one, from the back to the front. I hope that that's from the back to the front. I hope I'm not over explaining, but I want your results to look just like mine, and which is like a real baseball or softball. So we're going to take out that bottom stitch marker, and then we're going to pull both of these yarn tails until you get to that knot in the middle that marks the middle of the yarn. And again, I'm just keeping all the extra yarn on its own side so they don't get mixed up in the middle. So you can see there's the middle point of the yarn. And when we pull it tight, we want these two pieces touching. Pull them as tight to each other as you can without warping the stitches on the pieces. So you want these to look really tight and uniform. As tight and uniform as you can get them, without creating this piece and this piece to like smushing into each other. So I'm just going to do it until they touch and then stop. So I am going to, just like lacing shoes, if you want your shoelaces, like if you're adding a new shoelaces on your shoes, you want them to kind of cross over evenly, the same on all the laces. So to do that, I don't know if you know how often you change your shoelaces, but to do that, you always do one, you work in pairs, and then you always do the same side first each time. So that's what we're going to do with these. Each set of stitches as you go is going to line up to the other stitch. It's going to create pairs. And we want to start on one side every time you work each pair. So I'm going to just do the right side. You could do the left side if you want, but whichever side you choose, make it the same every time. So I'm going to grab my yarn from the right side and go into this left side piece first. So I'm going to go right into the next one, and that one, because we're in the beginning still, it just happens to have the stitch marker in it. So I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to pull that yarn all the way, and I'm going to leave it over here on this side so it's up and out of the way of this one. And that just creates, you know, a nice neat working space so you don't get it tangled. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then we're going to take the other one from the left and then work into this one on the right. So we're just crossing over into the opposite side. Pull it all the way tight, and then you're just going to set it over here. Remove the stitch marker. And that's the first pair of stitches. You can't really see the X's until you get a little ways in. Well, I mean, if you pull it really tight, you can see it. So you can see they're kind of making a little X, but you'll see the pattern, and it will look just like a baseball the more you get into it. So I'm going to move this one from the top down here now. That way, when I take this one, again, starting from the right again, then I'll be able to move it there without it being, this one being in the way. So I'm just going to move it down. So you want to make sure each time you sew a new stitch that you are going into the very next stitch, because it's kind of easy to accidentally go through the same one twice or to accidentally skip one. So I'm doing this on my work surface kind of far away from myself, but you know, you can pull it up close to yourself and look. Sometimes it's easier to see from the side as you sew that you're in the next stitch. So you can kind of see it easier that way. Starting from the right to the left, pull it nice and tight. And then to the left to the right side, and making sure you're going into the very next stitch. Pull it tight, and then you've created another X. So this is how real baseballs and softball laces have their stitches. Look, they come from the middle and kind of work outward like V's. And you can see it's making the V's. And so I'm going to move that one down. Make sure I go into the next stitch again. Pull it tight while putting it up here and out of the way. And sometimes the tail will kind of not bunch, but it's easy to work out. Make sure everything's nice and tight as you go. And then do the opposite side of the pair. And you can see it's creating a really nice little setup so far of these. And you just continue going like that all the way around the ball. Once you get going, it actually becomes really fast. Just keep consistent tension and tightness in these middle stitches. Just kind of tie them tight or pull them tight each time. So I just keep sewing it up, making sure it's tight, but not too tight. And as you go, it's going to start winding itself into, at first it's going to look more of like a square. So I will warn you. When it starts to form into a ball shape, it will kind of look squarish a little bit. Once you put stuffing in there, it is definitely a ball. So every so often, I like to stop and look at my stitches and make sure they all look nice and tight. And if anywhere looks kind of loose, you can grab your needle and just pull it up. And just tighten it yourself manually. Whoops. Let's try going through the yellow stitch. So you just make sure you're through the red only and just give it a little tug and pull it up toward this working yarn. So it's nice and snug, but not too snug. Oops, that wasn't too much. All right. So that's how it's starting to look. And the other thing I wanted to show you is, like I mentioned, that these stitch markers are checkpoints. So as you sew, they will get to closer and closer together, and then you'll get to a point where they will line up. You can always stop halfway or any point before that. Once you have one pair done, you can count your stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And that's not counting the current pair or the stitch marker. So I have 13 here. So in theory, I should also have 13 here. And if I do, then I know I'm on. If I don't, then I have to, well, first you should recount. And then if your number is not the same, then you want to figure out why. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's perfect. So I know I'm right on at this point in time. So I am at the first checkpoint. And as you can see, I have one stitch left until the stitch markers on both sides. So that is good. So I'm just going to take those out, as I know that I was right on. I know that my stitches line up perfectly, and as you can see, the ball's starting to kind of pull into a shape. So I can't lay it flat anymore, but that's fine. I'm just going to kind of hold it upward as needed while I sew. I just keep going where I cross over, pull the yarn out, and the tails are getting shorter, a little bit shorter. So it makes it a little easier to sew each time. And I just keep going. Okay, so you can see that we are about halfway between the last set of stitch markers, which were right here, and the beginning of the lacing. So we're about halfway, leaves a few inches of an opening. And about this point is where I want to add my stuffing. So I'm going to put a good amount of stuffing in here. You don't want to add too little and have it like look deflated after it gets like thrown around a lot, because since it's kind of a baseball or softball, you assume that's going to get handled a lot, tossed around. So if your stuffing ends up getting kind of matted in there, it'll end up looking lumpy and weird. So I like to start with a lot of stuffing in these. And just add, and then you kind of use the stuffing to shape it. So as you add the stuffing into the middle of these circular parts, I just kind of push some yarn out in there, or yarn, push some stuffing into those spots. Make sure you're stuffing the whole ball well and evenly the whole time. So you can also kind of roll it in your hands a little bit. And just keep going, stuffing the whole ball and pushing out these rounded parts. So you can see how rounded it's getting. Whereas it looked like a square before, it's actually looking like a ball now. And we will add stuffing again. Oh, and you can see my laces are not as tight as I want them to be here. See? So I'm definitely going to go around and check the tightness of the laces. And I'm actually going to do that about now. So just go to the beginning and then just follow the line up. Oops. Okay. Follow the line up to any spots where it's not as tight together as you would like. Find any gaps that you don't like. And then just do like I showed you before, where you pull those tight together. And once you do them, you have to keep going because you don't want to leave these loose strings. So once you do it, you're kind of committed to it. But that's okay, because you can use it as a chance to make sure the whole ball looks good. And now, since I got enough yarn here, I'm going to do it in pairs instead of each side, one at a time. So just kind of pull it tight. Not too tight. Whoops, didn't get that one. And because I'm holding it with my thumb, I feel like it's not going to loosen behind the... You don't want to have to go back and do it again. So we're down to both. Pull it tight. Bring it down and hold it down. And do the next pair. And I'm almost at the end. The whole time I'm sewing up the rest, I'm going to keep this one on the left particularly as tight as I can because I'm moving the ones on the right more. Pull that over. Pull it tight and hold it with my thumb. So I am going to put more stuffing in that gap. It's going to make it harder to keep sewing, but you don't want it to be flat when you are done. So keep holding these tight. Round out anything that needs to be. Get to that last pair. Just going to tighten this up for a second. Almost done. All right, so when you get to that last pair, you can see there's a gap. Technically, all stitches have been sewn, but you don't want to leave this opening. So I am going to do the same thing I've been doing, but into the first set again. And that will add just one more X into, that'll kind of be in the space between. You can see it closed that hole. But now, what do you do with your tails? So I am going to follow this very first stitch and bring my yarn tail into the ball. So I'm going to sew in a way that this yarn tail will go over this little stitch. Just kind of follow it, and then I'm going to just come out a random stitch pull it tight. You want to make sure that that stitch did line up on top of that one, so it hides it. If it shows a tiny bit, it's not going to be a huge deal. But you can see this one, you can see it's doubled. So if you can lay it over it, that's good. Mine kind of lays next to it, but it doesn't really look that bad, but you can just kind of see it. They do the same thing in a real baseball, so you'll see. Sometimes on a baseball you might see like a secondary. So I did the right side first again, and then I'm going to do the left side, because that's how I did it for the rest of the pattern. Put it under, so it lays over this one. I'm going to put it through here and bring it up so that it goes out the same stitch as the other one. And make sure it's actually coming out of the stitch and that you didn't split any of the yarn. Pull it snug, pull both snug. Make sure that that last stitch looks good, and it does. It's right here. Looks nice and tight. And then I'm going to, with my scissors, I'm going to cut these a little shorter just so they're easier to manage. I'm going to tie these two yarn tails together. Just like that. And then I'm going to take my crochet hook and just go anywhere else in the whole ball. It doesn't really matter where. Go back out that stitch that those yarn tails are coming out of, and use your hook to pull them in. You could also sew these in, but however you like to do to pull the final yarn in. Just make sure it's in there nice and tight so it doesn't come back out. All right, and there you have it. So I'm just going to give it a final roll just to plump it up for the camera. I still got stuffing stuck to the side of it there. You can see there is my completed softball and a baseball. And you can see, so the softball is larger because when I made the two pieces for the softball, I used a larger acrylic yarn. It's a size 4. It is Loops and Thread Soft Classic in neon yellow. And I also used a larger hook. So with this acrylic yarn, I used a 3.5mm hook. You probably can't see that, but when I made the baseball, I used I Love This Cotton in white, and I used a 3.125mm hook, and that's a silly number. A 3mm hook would be a good number. I did not find my 3mm hook, so I used my 3.125. The yarn that I used to sew up the ball is I Love This Cotton yarn in True Red. So the larger yarn and larger hook size is what made the softball bigger than the baseball. So if you wanted to make one of each to make them kind of sized appropriately how a real baseball and a real softball are sized compared to each other in real life, you could do it that way where you use, where you use, you know, bigger yarn, bigger hook, smaller yarn, smaller hook to get them to be proportionate to each other. So there you have it. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, and you want to like the video, maybe leave a comment, subscribe, any of that stuff, it would be helpful to my page. But also, if you're interested in making one of these, then you can find the pattern for it's one pattern for both, softball and baseball pattern. I'll put the link in the video description box below. It goes to my Etsy store. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy crocheting a ball.